We are going to talk about the millennials' mental health. This is very close to my heart because I'm the mother of a millennial and I'm also a caregiver, which means I'm involved in the care of a child who has mental health challenges. And I'm also a very confused, very conflicted, very mixed up caregiver. And because this topic is so close to my heart, I know there are a whole lot of you out there struggling with something similar. We really need to discuss this. So, there. Wow. Okay, never mind. Lonely, burned out, and depressed. This is the state of the millennials' mental health today. This is an article that I'm using. This was written in 2019, but it's as applicable today. Now, here, see, I'm showing off my highlighter on this. And look at that young girl's face. Look at her reflection. She's young, she's beautiful, and most likely she is highly, highly educated. Perhaps with very, very, very supportive parents who have been quite liberal, quite progressive, and yet this young person suffers. What happened to all those movies that we used to watch in which youth was carefree and you would be on the cycle with a bandana singing away, so happy and footloose and fancy free? Well, today youth is no longer any of this. Now, lonely, burned out, and depressed. Why so? Remember, in my little snippet, I said that we'll talk about the state first, and then we'll try and see what are the first hand causes that I have been a witness to. And finally, a disclaimer, I don't have answers, but some of the things perhaps we can do. Now, look, I'm really bugged about this because this is supposed to work. Why aren't you working? Hello? Let me try the reverse. Okay, never mind. Depression is on the rise among millennials. Look around you. Your neighbor at home, a distant nephew, a niece, extended family, a colleague, a classmate, people just out there sitting in restaurants. And you'll find that there's this fundamental, deep sense of sadness in many of these young minds. Very, very difficult for someone from my generation to comprehend. What is the reason for this despair? How can life appear so futile? How could you at this age, at 25, be suffering from a quarter life, what they call crisis? We used to have midlife crisis once upon a time. In fact, my parents' generation did not even have a midlife crisis. But more and more you hear about the quarter life crisis. And of course, these experiences cannot be discounted. They are happening. You and I cannot say that we don't understand, right? So, depression is on the rise among millennials. There are statistics to prove that. What else is happening with the millennials? Okay. Deaths of despair are also on the rise. What are these? See, deaths of despair are, well, literally deaths happening because of high risk, well, choices, let's say. To call it a high risk behavior would be not right. It would be labeling, not, it would be insensitive, But the fact is that there are some high risk choices that young people are making today. Those choices were not available to us. It could be alcohol, it could be some other substance abuse, it could be just choosing to be emotionally close to people. It could be difficulty in keeping down a regular job. They are not part of a regular community. Well, these are some of the high risk choices that young people make today. And if you're not going into the reasons for those choices, suffice to say that these can lead to a deep sense of despair, that something is not quite right with them. They do not have that sense of self, so sense of well-being, a sense of wholesomeness, and that can be extremely, extremely painful. And it's something that a lot of young people struggle with today. Well, it is partly linked to money stress. And why is that? We know that the economy has dipped like never before. Well, bubbles have burst in the past, but with COVID, there are people who've lost their jobs. Look at the pilots who overnight were laid off. They don't have their ICAs even to show that they were once upon a time perhaps a captain of a fleet. These are real, real, real issues that young people struggle with today. Many of them are not in the habit of saving. They're not as thrifty as the earlier generation. They do like the experiences. Experience is a big thing with young people, with the millennials. It has been. For many of them, it is not diamonds, it is not gold, it is not silk saris, it is not a mansion, but it is an experience. That is where they have spent money. Now, in India, millennials are pretty rich in the sense that many of them live with their parents. That's not the case in the West because that's not the culture. A lot of young people there take on loans to study, and there is this debt which is a constant. It's like eating them up from inside. It's like a cancer, it's a burden you carry. It really, really, really drains you of your life force. So there is this constant stress because the salaries are not going up, the jobs are becoming stagnant. Many young millennials have trouble sticking on to a job. The attrition rate is very high because the expectations are different from their job. We are not going there today, but suffice to say that there are multiple causes of stress that cause them to feel low, money being one of them. Now, see, money stress isn't just contributing to the millennials' mental health, it also means that many of them cannot afford to seek treatment. Now, again, there's a little difference in India and some other countries. In India, it's also the availability of mental health care. You may be able to get to it, but it may be too far. It may not be available. The ratio of mental health care professionals to the number of people ailing is very skewed. Even in India, there are young people sometimes who will not go for therapy because they feel that they cannot afford it. A good therapist, a good psychiatrist will cost you 2,500, sometimes 3,000, even 5,000 for a 45-minute session. So that just goes to show that mental health care is not very readily available. There are organizations, there are some wonderful people like Vijay Nallawala of Bipolar India and many others like them. There is a mental health today where whose founder Seema Jaiswal. There are multiple people who are committed and who are trying to make this available to more and more people. But at the moment, it definitely is not an ideal situation. This is an evolving space. This is taking shape, and solutions are, well, coming up as we move. This also is in a state of agility, let's say. Okay. Millennials are also lonely. Millennials are lonely. They're so digitally connected. And yet, they are lonely. Look at that. I'm showing off my pointer again, my highlighter again. Look at that kid, all by herself. And right behind her, there is that couple. I'm sure she's thinking, she's looking at that couple and telling herself, oh, I don't have a boyfriend. I don't have a steady partner. I don't have an anchor. Well, that's another reason that millennials are lonely today because many of them are deciding to marry much later. Many of them are not part of a religious community or a social community. They just don't or are not able to find their tribe. They have multiple interests. Many of them have this fear of missing out. So they're constantly trying to do everything. So they're moving perhaps from one community to another. It takes them some time to commit to themselves. So when you say commitment phobic, it is not just commitment to a person. It also means commitment to a cause, commitment to an idea, commitment to, well, a way of being. So these are primarily the reasons that millennials are lonely, even though they are surrounded by other young people, even though they are connected online all the time and they have friends sitting across the seven, eight, nine seas, very different from how it used to be, and yet tragically, they are lonely. State. Now, they're dealing with burnout in and out of the workplace. You know, the first time I heard my millennial say that she has trouble filling out forms or going to the bank or getting a pollution certificate or just riding a cab and having to deal with a driver who's perhaps sweaty, who's perhaps cantankerous, who's not very friendly, or maybe a cab has cancelled at the last minute. There is that frustration. You then need to rebook another one. The first time I started seeing this, it amazed me as to why can the millennials, not all of them, why can't some of them just deal with the stress of just the regular mundane maintenance tasks, grocery shopping, boring tasks, just, well, and these actually can be very therapeutic. Just hanging the laundry out to dry has a very calming effect on the person who's doing it. Try it sometime, laying the table, but this is not happening. This is not the case with some millennials. So there is burnout outside, there is burnout inside the workplace because the expectations of work, the recognition that they crave, the feedback that they crave, the definition of collaboration, for instance. In my days, the boss would give you a task and expect you to take ownership of that. That was called collaboration. But today, when you give a task to a millennial, the millennial is likely to take one step forward and then come back for a feedback, then take one step forward, come back to collaborate, constantly uh, brainstorming, constantly putting their heads together, seeking inputs, seeking a far deeper involvement than the earlier generations used to. And when they don't find it, when they find silence, when they find dismissal, when they find their 50-year-old boss just retreating behind the closed door because what is this? Who is this? I can't deal with this rude person. I can't deal with this person who's demanding a comfortable right to work or who's unhappy with the cab I'm providing them. So the senior managers, 50 plus, they just retreat. There is burnout there because there is no appreciation. There is no stroking that the young person is getting. Many millennials dealing with mental health problems at work say that their office does not provide adequate support. Well, this is true. This is true. I'm trying to do it from here. I'm trying to click from here. What's happening? Come on, come on, come on. Okay. Well, what kind of support are the offices going to provide when there's just a singular lack of ability to firstly recognize mental health issues, and there is a cultural attitude that it's it's something that's not it could be faked in some cases, or sometimes it's difficult to understand for people that there is something actually going on there. So they will take time to acknowledge that this person is in pain. We understand as a culture physical pain, but emotional pain is not something that we have really been very, very familiar with in the past. So it takes us time. More and more offices, however, today they are getting into they're beginning to recognize the need, because there have been cases where young people just drop off literally from the face of the earth. They just go missing for days, or sometimes they are not able to get up in the morning and report to work. Unheard of. It used to be unheard of. I remember a young millennial saying that she is not a morning person. And I've heard this phrase from many others that they are not morning people. They are not able to gather themselves up in the morning. And when we were growing up, it used to be the dumb thing to just be out like that. And that's what you did. But today, the struggle is very different. Employees who work outside a traditional 9 to 5 are particularly vulnerable to depression, as are the women, LGBT people, and the racial minorities. Racial minorities, we know, any time that a human being ends up being the other outside the larger group, there is a stress of being the other. It's not easy. Now, what's happening today is that 9 to 5 job has been completely dismissed, rejected, thrown out of the window. This is a boring, stupid way to work. There are many millennials who just believe in working a couple of hours a day, or a couple of, few days in a week. And Saturday, Sunday is my time. So I'm not going to pick up the phone. If the office calls after 6:30 or Saturday, Sunday, I'd like to just go off into the hills, go to the Kangra, go to the Himachal Pradesh, or go into the hills somewhere. But there is a certain sense of comfort in a schedule which a 9 to 5 job gave the gave people in the past, because at 5 o'clock, once you checked out, that was the end and you could switch off. But when they're not in a 9 to 5 job, they're not able to switch off at all. They're all the time on, while eating, while sleeping, while out with their friends. It's a constant hum at the back of their mind. There's work, there's work, there's work. There are ideas, and there is this feeling of being stretched all the time like a rubber band. So that is another reason why millennials are feeling well stressed. Workers say discrimination due to mental health illness is more prevalent than any other at the workplace. We just talked about it. We just talked about it because if there is lack of awareness, if there is lack of acknowledgement, if there is lack of empathy or sympathy, and you don't understand what depression is, it took me several months to recognize that what I'm seeing is depression. And it's true that many of the earlier generation have not seen it. And many of us in our families, if there is a person who's been suffering, struggling with depression, they're likely to laugh about it, or they're likely to become a family joke. that, oh, that person is, she says she's depressed. What is this depression? She's forever changing doctors or eating medicines. If this we just touched, nearly half of millennials have left a job for mental health reasons. This is the state today. Again, unheard of. There are young people today who will tell you that they do not take on too much workload in their offices, or they keep it light because it affects their mental health. This is a real struggle. For all their mental health issues, there's a bright side. The millennials, known as the therapy generation, are helping to destigmatize therapy. Remember how it was earlier? Nobody would admit that they're going to a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist. कौन? वो पागल, पागलों वाला डॉक्टर. Mental. Those were the ways in which it was referred to. It was all very hush, just as the word boyfriend was a hush. Remember? But today, that's not the case anymore, and thank God for it. So if you're struggling with depression, young millennial, if your millennial is struggling with depression, the thing to do would be to get help. That goes without saying. But again, like I said, many of us either take time recognizing that there is a mental health issue, or help is not available close by. So we just continue suffering. What are the causes? Some of the causes. These are the causes that I've seen firsthand. Pornography. I'm starting with that only because I've not set an animation to it. And I'm so annoyed with this thing. I can't get over it that this thing is not working. Hello? Yes. Causes. Let me try again. Who's a who's a Logitech pointer expert out there? I'll have to get in touch with them. Okay. Now, ambition. Ambition is a big reason young people today are ambitious. They want to make it big. It's not just it's not being regular, being ordinary is not good enough, please, because we've brought them up and we've told them you can be anything you want in this world, in this life, and they have taken our words literally to heart. So a lot of millennials are not lazy on, if they, just because they have mental health issues or they are depressed, it doesn't mean that they're lazy. No, it's the opposite. In fact, they want more. They want to work. They are very ambitious. They want to stand out. They want to stand apart. They want to get there and quickly. Ambition. There's an entrepreneurship lie out there. Who's making money? There are these gurus. There are these incubators. There are these whole lot of young people who are in sweatshops, entrepreneurial sweatshops in Bangalore. And this dream of the entrepreneurship, it's a lie. It's not entirely true. They're not making the kind of money they set out thinking they're going to make. There's a hookup culture today amongst the young people. It's messing with them. It is messing with them. This has not worked in other countries, and most likely is not going to work in India, and even more so because in India there is the inertia of our conservative traditional culture, not very easy to shake off. Alcohol. Alcohol used to be unavailable when we were growing up, but it is free flowing today. You go to a party, a Conti party after the 12th standard, after the 11th standard, or the 10th standard. The bars are open in homes. A lot of parents today, progressive parents, where they call themselves or they think they are being progressive, they feel, I'd like to start my child drinking at home. That way it's safer. Because if we don't permit it at home, they're going to hide and do it a lot more. But well, time will tell whether that policy is really working, because this is a habit and it is addictive. It's a very slippery slope. Smoking up. I feel very strongly about smoking up. A lot of young people feel that it's organic marijuana or weed or hash. is Babaji ka Prasad. Shivji bhi used to smoke, I mean, use this, but it messes with the head. There has been enough research out there. And well, that question is out there, but I know of people who have suffered what is called ganja psychosis, who have suffered memory lapses, who have suffered a kind of a dullness in their brain, especially when they start smoking up under 25 years of age. It's good to educate yourselves on all of this. There is digital addiction, of course, an inability to get away from the screen. In many cases, young boys, gaming. Gaming is an addiction for many of them. It's hard to drag yourself away from all this movement and color that's happening on the screen. And finally, pornography. Pornography is so available, so readily consumed. It has, I don't know, I think it's just altered our brains somehow and made us less sensitive, made us less loving, less affectionate. It's we view people as objects, and a lot of the stuff that young people watch today is quite violent. So I would say do what it takes. Now, that was the state of the health we talked about. We talked about the reasons that I've seen firsthand. There are, in addition to that, other reasons like anxiety coming from the climate, from the state of affairs. Those were not all the reasons, but these are very powerful, primary, very, very toxic reasons for the state of mental health today. Now, what you can do is, first of all, each one of us today needs to give ourselves a psycho education. Affection works, not easy always, especially when you're disappointed, especially when you are alarmed, especially when you're scared of what you're seeing. You see a young person you love going downhill, it can be devastating. Humor. Humor works with young people, and follow your gut. I do believe that for all the theory, all the suggestions from the professionals, anything that other people might tell you, mental health is a very, very individualistic ailment. It'll differ. Depression doesn't look the same in every person, it's different. Similarly, bipolar disorder will seem different. Schizophrenia is different in every person because there's so many variables, and it's not always, I mean, it's an, it's, well, it's extra sensory. There is this, it's a whole, it's a disease or an ailment or a health issue which is made up of multiple dimensions. That is for a fact. So I do believe that when you're dealing with the mental health of a young person, follow your gut. Do what your heart tells you. You have a sense that this is what I should be doing. This is what I should be saying at this point. Do that. Follow your gut. Don'ts. And my Logitech pointer is working now. And I'm running over time, just a few minutes more. Please bear with me. Don'ts. Don't do this. If there is a problem with your millennial, for heaven's sake, for God's sake, seek help. Seek help. Don't leave it too late. Even if you have sought help, there are no guarantees that it will go the way you hope it will go, but there is no excuse for not seeking help because lives are at stake. Don't give up. Don't give up. There'll be phases where you feel completely powerless to do anything and you're just standing by in the wings, but stay there. Don't give up ever completely. And don't stop living because your millennial or another millennial, somebody close, somebody around you is suffering from a mental health crisis, you don't stop living. You don't sit down and say, oh my God, my life's come to an end. This is it. No, you need to look after yourself, preserve yourself, because you are no good to that person you love if you're not taking care of yourself. So don't stop living. Continue to write, continue to speak, continue to play golf, continue to dance, continue to eat Raj Kachori. Do it. Continue to do things that you like doing and try not to operate from a place of fear. When there is a mental health issue, a millennial's mental health can put the fear of God into us. It is scary to see a young life spiraling out of control. It's an ultimate nightmare for a parent, for an adult. It's very easy to slip into a place of fear, but try not to do that because that's not helping anyone. Now, one more thing with in your communication with the millennials. Yes, but is a wrong statement. If the millennial tells you, I'm feeling low, or I don't feel like, uh, 1 minute, or I don't feel like attending this particular family event. You don't say, yes, but I hear you, but why don't you try? No. Instead of that, you say, yes, and. In all your communication with the millennials, try using yes and. So, all right, you don't feel like attending this. And would you like me to get something for you from there? Put it in such a manner which is more palatable to the young person because it builds up resistance otherwise. This is the new generation's desire. Our millennials want creativity, they want a sense of belonging, they want self determination. That is what they want. They don't want you to determine what they ought to be or what their lives ought to be like. Self actualization is another very deep seated need with the millennials, almost spiritual in many cases. They want conversation, they want collaboration, no talking down, no authoritative declarations. This is what they need, this is what they're constantly seeking. And that brings me to the end of my case for mental health. I started by saying that millennials' mental health is the single most, it's a social, moral, political, emotional issue that we are facing. It's a state almost of crisis, and the sooner the sooner we come to grips with it, the sooner we accept it, the sooner we educate ourselves about it, the sooner we hold hands with each other about it and help each other rather than hide behind doors or keep other people from knowing that it's a challenge that you're struggling with. There are many communities out there that you can be a part of. I would urge you to just step out. There are no easy answers, there are no easy solutions. It may not have a happy ending. It may be a situation that you are stuck with for life, but there is grace in trying to do all you can do. Thank you very much for seeking with me a millennials mental health. I would love to talk to some of you who want to be forthcoming on this issue, and we can touch very specific pain points if you are open to it. Bye bye. See you next Saturday, same time, 5 p.m. on the Seenager Seeks Wisdom Curators Provoking Minds. Namaste.